Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. It is my honor to introduce this person whom I have met only 6 minutes beforehand, who spent most of her childhood in Harlan. I know I'm making this up.
No.
Also, it wasn't 6 minutes ago because I got on 7 minutes ago when you were already talking.
Chad,
So
he's got you there, Johnny.
We've known each other like 10 whole minutes.
Chad, you're lucky that I got that most out. Ruth Anna Evans, the author, thank you so much for your time. I have the first question I've got to ask. How in the hell did you end up meeting James Thomas, or as I call him, Dr. Jerkface?
Well, that was courtesy of Brandon Applegate, who
Oh,
is
Don't boo Brandon.
How did you meet Brandon Applegate, and what kind of, were you out troll hunting?
Well, I was new to the Twitterverse, and I was looking at indie books, and I saw his book, and read it, and it was fantastic. So I reached out to him, and I was like, "I love your book," and we just kind of supported each other's work since then. And he's actually helping out with Ooze a little bit, and has a story in it as well. And so he's just been kind of helping me get connected, and I really appreciate him. So he's not a jerk face.
Oh no, Dr. Thomas is the Dr. Jerkface.
Oh,
it is when it's a book called Ooze, and he submits a story about two people in love in feudal Japan.
Well, now that could have oozing effects, Chad. You don't know. I mean,
absolutely.
That
Ooze came from all kinds of places in this book, let me tell you.
And since I've had surgery, ooze is coming out of all kinds of places for me.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I thought we wouldn't get into that, but I'll just keep that mental image in my head. That's going to bear with me.
You want to see the staples, James?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
We've known each other 10 minutes.
Yeah, but James and I have known each other for 30 years as lovers.
No. Factually untrue. Spiritually debatable, but factually untrue.
Chad?
Physically totally true.
Chad, there was no love.
No.
So, Ruth Anna.
Like Vikings.
Yeah. I've got a really bad joke, but I don't know Ruth Anna really well enough to go there. So what we're trying to do is make sure that you feel at ease. And what I want to do is go down memory lane. So it was fascinating when we were talking earlier. You worked as a reporter in Harlan, which is close to where I grew up in Leslie County in Hyden, Kentucky. And you went to, do you mind if I say where you went to college?
Oh, absolutely. No problem.
You went to Berea. So I'm kind of curious, can you talk about where you grew up? And because you don't just, back to I've been reading your stuff, you didn't get into this to write horror, and we're not a horror podcast, so you've obviously gotten into horror the last couple of years though.
Hold on,
right?
Real quick, Joe, can you say what college did she go graduate from?
Berea.
Hippie.
Well, yeah.
Hey,
I mean,
and when we're done, she's going to make me a lovely pot.
I'm Chardonnay and books. I'm a hippie. It's okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
So no, you're fine. I grew up moving around all over the place. I was actually born in Canada.
That explains.
Then, yeah, well, I'm an American citizen and have lived all over the U.S. and out west, Arizona, New Mexico, Idaho, Colorado. Lived in Minnesota, Tennessee, Kentucky. We just had a crazy family that moved all the time. So books were my thing that I connected with. When I, didn't have a chance to connect with people because we were moving all the time. So that's kind of how I developed my love of reading. And then I actually went to college for English and English writing, but never really got into fiction. I sort of just didn't have the ideas. So that's why I ended up in journalism, is, to do something with the written word.
Yeah, Chad and I were communication majors and both broadcasting. And
okay,
Chad is the only one out of the two of us that worked a professional day in broadcasting and news. Chad, you enjoy your time in the news?
Oh God, I wish it'd burn in hell.
Oh, that bad.
So-
It was 2 years of pain. That's what that was.
It is pain. It is
Yeah.
pain.
Pain for no reward, no benefit.
I liked the writing. There's some beautiful stories to be told, but journalism is a dark, dark field.
It
You
is.
just come across the worst days of people's lives, and a lot of my stories have come from kind of the horror of
Well,
what I saw in the field as a journalist.
and just to show you what kind of background I came in, I must have been they hated me, but when they would go, Chad, you're going on a story. Almost every other story was an animal cruelty story.
Oof.
So I saw things that I still can't get out of my head.
Chad,
Yeah.
can you get some more B-roll over there of that tripod dog that's got
Oh, dude,
it wasn't
it
weird
was-
until Sarah McLachlan started following you around. That was when it got a little bit weird.
all I can say, it was far worse than that.
I know, Chad, that actually I was actually, hey, how are you? I was just, you've got somebody right behind you.
This is my daughter Hazel. Hi,
Hi,
okay,
Hazel.
go away.
My name's Mikkel. That is Sosha. And Rodney.
I guess she's gonna be making appearances on the podcast. So come
Wait,
on.
who's Sosha?
You.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, okay,
Chad.
okay, good. I don't want to be Rodney.
Well, real quick though, you talked about
Rodney's
reading
that
when
lover I had for 30 years.
you
Let's
were
see.
you talked about y'all just aren't gonna let me get this back on track, are you?
We're going to make sure that Ruth Anna is having a good time. I'm sitting here having my protein drink, not necessarily through what I usually drink it through. Go ahead, Jane.
I'm having a blast already, guys. No worries.
Good job.
You talked about how you kind of used books when you moved around a lot. I've got to ask because before I went higher education, I was an English education major. I was going to teach in our school system, and then I remembered I hated being in school. I hated high school specifically, and so I was like, "Wait, why am I back here? Why did I choose this?"
I'm glad you realized that early.
Yeah, it was. It's a lot. Yeah, but so what are some of the stories that you did like growing up? Obviously, well beyond horror, you came to horror. You started writing horror later on. But what are some of the stories that people would, if they built a time machine, what would people catch you reading?
I was a classics girl. I enjoyed like I'd say my favorite book for years and years and years was probably Jane Eyre. So like and Dostoevsky and that kind of thing was what I was reading in high school.
Crime and Punishment is one of my all-time favorite books. So
yeah, Crime and Punishment. So probably like the darker classics would be what I spent most of my time with in high school. And then as a kid, I just read all the series I could get my hands on. The Nancy Drew and just anything that you could just gobble up. I was reading it. I did a lot with fantasies, so Chronicles of Narnia probably was a favorite for half my childhood. I remember Tree Grows in Brooklyn. So I wasn't a horror reader at all. I was reading, but all of those have sort of like a sinister element in them too.
Yeah, so James's headphones stopped working. When they kick back in, I'll pay you $10 if you call Edgar Allan Poe a dirty bitch.
My headphone never did stop working. And
it's not working.
If you trash Poe one more time, I'm going to come to your house. And actually, I'll just stand in your yard and
listen. I was his lover for 30 years. He's never coming to your house. It's all on his schedule.
Chad, I'll start on page 1. I'll do it.
Oh, look at that beautiful tome.
I've got it. And I'm not talking about just the poetry or just the short stories. I will do the entire, philosophy of poetry. I'll do it all, Chad. I'll do it.
I mean, Poe is worth a read.
So I'm kind of curious. You said you couldn't find the way to write fiction, and then you went into journalism. And now coming from you, who is obviously, after reading your material, is a very creative person, and myself, I consider myself a very creative person. And we went into the journalism aspect of it, where there is really hardly any room for being creative. It's, everything has its set ways of things of how it's been from the dawn of time. And you don't deviate from that. If you deviate from that, you're you might as well look for another job.
Yeah.
So how's Truman Capote?
when did it click? When did it click? When did the ability to start writing fiction click?
Well, I actually stopped writing completely for several years after
Oh,
I got
really?
out of journalism. I went from journalism to like nonprofit marketing to education, just kind of floating around there, not doing anything at all with writing. But then um, when we got sent home in 2020, uh, because school was closed and I was just kind of bouncing around my house, had to do something with all that anxiety and nerves, and that was when I had an idea for my very first novella, which is written under another name, and it was a young adult fantasy story. Um, and I had that idea, and I just kind of slowly wrote it. And it was this huge deal for me at the time. I'm writing, hooray, I'm writing. And even just like once a week, turning a little corner in the story was just so exciting. And then I got that book out, and someone that I had met in beta reading was like, this is kind of actually psychological horror. This isn't really young adult fantasy. I was like, wait a minute, horror. And then from then it was just like, I haven't run out of ideas yet. It just comes so naturally to write about what scares us and what scares me, because um, I'm not an anxious person. Like, I don't suffer from clinical anxiety, but I am a fear-filled person. Like, I am a person that I turn the corner and I feel like someone semi truck is going to crash into my car. Like, there's a storm and it's probably going to be a tornado and my house is going to be blown away and I'm going to be cowering in the basement and my dogs are going to be blown. Like, I have worst case scenario in my head all the time. So it takes nothing for me to
Chad,
come up with something that's going to just devastate, hopefully, my audiences.
Chad, did your dad do any kind of door-to-door sales in Indiana?
No.
Oh, so is it?
I think
But
you know where I'm going with that comment.
Yeah.
it's
Dad,
Well,
are
I'm
you
more-
sure
I am
who
more-
your dad is?
I'm kind of honestly though, I'm kind of more I used to be that way, but I'm really more the exact opposite now. I'm more anxiety filled and not so much of there's going to be something behind the corner that's going to jump out and kill me. I used to be
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, just like
Joe and Jane spent over a decade of me like that.
and
Yeah.
with any luck, we'll get you back there.
He's got the plain old regular anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no,
Clinical anxiety.
I think that's one of the things, though, because I think there is the balance between, I don't know if you want to say pessimism, but I do have anxiety. I had to be medicated for a while. I'm mostly better now.
Mostly.
But mostly,
Yeah.
Not by the time this podcast is over, you're not.
I know.
I hope not.
But as we thinking about that and thinking about some of your writing, it starts with something small, right? And it just
Yeah.
builds. And I
Something
think that
normal.
as I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is effective because it's all that little stuff that we start to get worried about, right? It's
Mhm.
the fear of maybe getting older, the fear of this, the fear of, and then it just keeps getting worse. But that oddly puts stuff in perspective too, right? All of a sudden, what we were originally afraid of might not have been so bad.
It is a little bit of a coping read, I hope, in that it just gets so bad that it gets almost a little bit ludicrous. Um, some of my stories definitely are black comedy in that way. It's like, surely, surely it's not, surely, oh, I don't want to spoil one of my stories, so I won't say the title of it. But one of the stories that it's about a vet, and the dogs are being euthanized. So sorry for all the people where you're not allowed to kill the dog, but I did. Um, the dogs are being euthanized, and by the end, the vet is chopping the dogs up into little pieces and reassembling them in order to reanimate them as Franken dogs. And it's like, okay, I'm going to lose my dog at some point, but probably he's not going to have his eyeballs plucked out and replaced with other dogs' eyeballs. So there is that.
Right. So what you said you were dealing with just all the stuff that was going on, and you really weren't writing fiction until 2020.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't
Just
writing
want to
fiction
make
until
sure I got
2020.
that correct.
Yeah, then I popped out with that little um, young adult fantasy novella. Started writing some horror short stories, and then I came out with my self-published um, "What Did Not Die," which is a ghost story about a child fire ghost who's a ghost who sets fires. Um, and that was like where I learned how to self-publish. Um, the process and sort of started getting connected in the community and that kind of thing. And then from there, it's been the book and now the collection. And I've got a couple of novellas that I'm submitting out to try to get published.
Uh-huh.
So I just
So,
write now.
so yeah, with the self-publishing, what's been kind of your approach to that? Because I'm really interested in that kind of angle of it, because I would imagine it gives you a great deal of control, but it's also a lot of having to self-market, I would imagine.
And we have
Yeah.
friends on both sides. We have friends with agents who have publishers, and then we have friends who are self-publishing, and then we have some friends who are self-publishing who do quite well.
Yeah. Um I want to stay hybrid. So I have had a couple of little things published by publishers. D&T Publishing picked up one of my stories for their Darktown anthology. And then Hungry Shadow published a little drabble that I wrote. So, and I'm submitting and that kind of thing, but I'm going to stay self-publishing too. I do love that control. Um, because I do my own art for one thing, and I never want to stop doing that. I want to make sure that I'm always connecting my stories with images. And Ooze actually has a cover art for every story, all 21 stories in it that I made. So that's a huge part of why I want to continue self-publishing. But it is a process, and it is a lot of learning how to market. Um, but that's not something I hate. So, it's not that bad. It's not fun, but it's not that bad. A lot of it is really just connecting with people.
Yeah. Well, you have to be your own. I mean, you're your own sales department. You're doing all your own promotions. You're your own
Right.
hype person. Well, now I'd like to talk to you about your art, and I'm curious. So, when did you start showing a flair for art and drawing? And
Well, I can't draw for shit. Um, but I learned Photoshop and journalism.
yeah,
And then I did not have the money to make my own covers. So I just did everything I could to try and make a cover look halfway decent. Um, and I got some help. Trueborn Designs, she goes by NW Reader. She's been mentoring me as far as like how to do all the fun little stuff in Photoshop and make things look better. But I've just been cranking it out. It's a bug. It bit me, and I'm doing as much as I can. How's that protein?
it's awful.
So, you just to make sure I have a complete understanding. So, the cover, for instance, to your novelette Phantom Pain, you did the cover work for that?
Yep.
Because that's a very that's one of those images that when I saw it and I read the story, and I was like, that image itself is a haunting image, right? It's a very
I love that image.
provocative image because and if you're listening to this, folks, pull up Amazon, look up Phantom Pain, buy Phantom Pain, read Phantom Pain.
Thank you.
But it's a very
Mainly buy it.
it is a very stark image, but the clarity of the eye, I think, makes it so powerful because everything else is, let's just say, injured. But
Damaged.
yeah,
Yes.
that eye is piercingly looking at you. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that, I saw the image, and then like I said, I read it, and as I was thinking about it, I was like, that image keeps coming back to me of
Mhm.
how powerful all of that is.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't want to take credit for the image itself because I do, like a lot of other cover artists, I do use images that I find places. So I license all of my images, but I don't create them. What I have done a lot with Ooze is a lot of photo manipulation, which has turned out to be really fun. Um, so like one of my favorite pieces, it's called Teething. It's the first one in the book, and it's got a baby's fist coming out of another baby's mouth, and it's just like bleh. And that was that I kind of played with and made happen. So it's been a whole learning process, but some of the crazy, fun, cool stuff that you can do with Photoshop is just like I'm doing it instead of writing sometimes. I love it.
So a lot of your stories do have that sense of body horror,
Yeah.
of whether it be aging, whether it be whatever. But there
I
is
was
that,
about to say, and the fear of aging and death. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So things that go wrong with our bodies, things that,
Yeah.
and sometimes taken to extremes. What is it about that you think is so compelling, or what draws you to that? Because it definitely is compelling to read.
Mm.
I was just wondering what kind of pulls you in that direction.
Well, I appreciate that. I have a lot of medical problems, and some of them are very disgusting medical problems. I have ulcerative colitis, which is where you get ulcers in your colon. So yeah, yuck. So I
I've
have
seen
like
pharmaceutical commercials about this.
absolutely, I'm sure you have.
It was
It's like
right
Crohn's
during
disease.
camp.
If you've ever heard, Crohn's disease is a little bit more well known, but it's like
Yeah.
the cousin to Crohn's disease.
We actually
Um,
have a Crohn's disease joke story.
go for
Not
it.
an
Do
actual
it. I'm here.
No, it's not a joke. It's a story. Well, you get through your medical problems, and then Chad maybe favor was with how one time his two twin brothers and I made them think that they had Crohn's. Anyway, Ruth Anna, keep on. You have a lot of health
I mean, you
problems.
can't really drop that.
Chad, you don't remember this?
I can't talk about my medical problems all day long.
You called
You
me
tell
up
me.
from Louisville, Kentucky in 2004, 2005, probably 04, to
04.
curse
It would
me,
have been 04.
to curse me because your brothers saw an episode of a show I was doing at the time in Morehead State University called MSU Weekly. I worked there as a hall director. Sorry, Rosanna. I worked there as a hall director, and I was also doing something with the communications department. I had a show every week, and we interviewed this lady whom I knew who had Crohn's, and she was talking about it. Well, Chad's brothers can be a little bit of
Hypochondriacs.
I was trying to be nice, hypochondriac, right? They
Mhm.
saw the show and were immediately convinced that they had Crohn's. I can't believe Chad doesn't remember this.
I don't remember
I
it.
do remember it because I
You
remember
it
hearing.
too?
I remember the kickback from it because I got to be on the sidelines as you all went back and forth. It was a good time to be on the sidelines.
So I am so sorry. I'm shocked that Chad doesn't remember this. All right, Ruth Anna. That's the short version of this. I made his brothers get Crohn's.
Well, you shouldn't have done that. That was pretty mean.
Yeah, I'm an asshole though. I mean,
uh, so
They deserved it. It's
I
okay.
haven't written a bloody colon story yet, but the idea of medical things just happening to you and having no control over them, and your life has to stop and everything has to stop. I mean, you can relate to this right now. It's
yeah,
just you it's something to be afraid of. And not only that, it's like not only can you get sick, but you can get sick to the point where someone is going to have to care for you and you're completely incapable of caring for yourself. That is terrifying. And it can happen to anyone at any time.
yeah. It's
Sorry
my
for the anxiety people out there, but I
no.
mean,
No,
ah,
Hey, quick, real quick. It's not because of surgery, and I'm pretty sure that the two boneheads know this or probably would guess this about me. It as I grow old, my biggest fear, an actual biggest fear, is that I will be a burden on someone, much less my
right,
son. And I have
right.
noticed that it is my biggest fear. I mean, I have people all the time. It's like, oh, you got the kid. He'll take it. I was like, no, that's my biggest fear, is that I would have to depend and be a burden.
Hmm.
but and I think one of the things that is
I just
interesting about the
looking at a cat that was walking by actually. It was right before that,
I
as I was
think one of
finishing
the
up.
things that is really interesting though about the time that we live in, and I'll do a little bit of self-disclosure here, is that we now know more, right? So there's more to terrorize you.
Mm,
My family
absolutely.
has a genetic marker that, it used to be, oh, if you're male in my family, you get to live to 70. And back when the lifespan was shorter than 70, we were like, woohoo. Now that the lifespan is above 70, we burn out at 70.
Wow.
But now, because of modern medicine, they've at least named it. We know what's wrong. It's a genetic issue. broken, check 2, blah, blah, blah. But it's really interesting because my father obviously had it. When he became ill, they said, "Oh, this could be, could be. Do you want to be genetically screened?" And he said, "Well, if it'll help my kids, sure." He was screened, and then they said, "Okay, yep, you've got it. Do your children want to be screened?" My other siblings, to my knowledge, have opted not to, but I was like, "Well, I want to know. I want to know." And sure enough, I have that same marker, and they're like, "Well, we can do some things to. I mean, but it's genetic. What do you do with genetic data? What do you?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's really interesting because as things advance, we sometimes get sold on, and it's something that actually I was reading one of your stories, and it was like, oh, this is really interesting because we get sold on, oh, they'll come out with something. They'll come out with something that
Mhm.
will help you. There will
Right.
be something. But now we also know that, right? We know
Well,
that,
and then there's those some things that come out, and then those some things, the side effects are so terrible that like I'm on a medication that if I stop taking it for more than a couple of days, I can have seizures that don't stop.
and I think
Like that's a medicine. That's
I
something
was
that I'm putting
waiting
in my
for the
body.
joke. Oh, I was waiting
There's another joke.
no, I was just waiting for the joke at the end of that.
No, that's it. That's
Stop.
the joke. Seizures that don't stop. That's what happens to you if you start taking the medicine that I'm on. So it's like you're right. As we get further along and as we develop more and more treatments, it gets more and more frightening in a way.
yeah, and it's constantly that balance, right? And it's it's one of the things that I think about, and we used to have well, he's still around. We just don't directly work. But we used to work with a colleague who was, I'm a big man, I'll admit it. He was in good shape. He was in all that stuff, and he came one day and he goes, "Oh," he said, "I'm having trouble getting a life insurance policy or something along those lines." And I said, "What? I have one, and I don't run every day. I've never ran a marathon in my life. Maybe I'd run to a buffet, but that's about all I've got in me."
Felt.
And he was like, "No, they did the pre-screening and they said my blood pressure was too high." And I'm like, "Man, if they won't let you in, well, how did I get through the door?" And so I think that's another part of it, right? It's that
Mhm.
we can't even trust our eyes. We can't look, well, that person looks healthy. That person, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Ye-
mean, and it's like a little thing, and we have Google too. So, you've got a little spot somewhere, like in Phantom Pain, she just has a little spot on her breast, and if you Google that, you're dead,
Oh yeah,
You got
WebMD has
6 months
pronounced
to
me
live.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally dead. So I just make that true. I just make it true. Anything that can happen, it does happen, and it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it.
I want to talk about one of your stories I was reading today because it includes a lot of what we were just talking about of kind of growing old, illness, but it also deals with being a parent and addiction. So
Mm,
is it the Nicholas is it's I'm sorry, say
Nicholas is gone.
Nicholas
Nicholas
is
is
gone.
gone.
So I was wondering because addictions, every family's got addiction. Do you have addiction in your family? Are you familiar with addiction?
No, addiction is a fear of mine, though.
Really?
Um,
She said drinking while she was taking her 42 medications.
I'm fine. I'm really fine.
No,
No,
no, no, no, that's what you tell the group every week.
I don't have a problem. No, I am fine actually. But no, addiction is a fear of mine, and I think that that is something that I just kind of every fear is a good story, I think. And so that was what I went with was okay, what if I were an alcoholic? And what if I were an alcoholic to the point where no matter what I could not stop drinking? And I had a child, um, and everything that happens when you can't stop drinking happened to me with my child. So, you lose your job, you lose your home, you get kicked out of here, you don't have any money. Like all of these things that can happen do happen, but then there's also that supernatural element of, okay, so what else could happen?
Yeah, what
Um,
what else shows up at the gas station?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So, and there's a lot of metaphor in that story in terms of like stealing your children's childhood away from them by being imperfect.
Well, and he
Um,
has the line that the old man says it, and even the kid kind of says it. You know, you're just going to go get another bottle when he's getting older, and then the old man says, This is the easiest thing for him to do. Otherwise, you would have ruined his life."
mhm. Yeah,
No,
and
he'll
I
give
mean,
you
I
a
think
short
that's a
death in comfort.
it could be, the fear of every parent is that you're ruining your child's life.
Right, and we don't know that she's not going to quit, that she's going to quit. I mean, she stops a little bit at the end.
Right.
I mean, we don't know what happens on the second page. I mean, after the story.
I mean, she's tried to quit a lot.
Yeah, she's trying to quit a lot. I mean, she basically quit for a few hours just to get into a home, and didn't
Well,
Yeah.
really even
and,
succeed at that.
and even then, dealing with addiction, I mean, alcohol is one of those, quite frankly, somewhat rare addictions that if you try to quit cold turkey, there can be some
Mhm.
pretty serious side effects.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and she goes through those things, and she goes through them in front of her. I don't remember how old he is, probably 5, I
5.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. She goes
5-year-old boy
through
stuck with me for obvious reasons.
yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's
Uh,
fine.
he watches her get the shakes and sweat and have headaches and have hangovers and, puke and all of these things that a 5-year-old should never see his mother do, but she could not stop. And she's in this addiction. Um, the title of this book is called No One Can Help You, by the way. No One Can Help You: Tales of Lost Children and Other Nightmares.
Mhm.
And it's available on Amazon in paperback and
And we'll get
ebook.
to that in a few minutes. We'll get to that. How
Yeah.
we can find everything in a minute.
Yeah, I just remembered I hadn't said the title. So she's a conscious, like, competent, normal person within this addiction. And I think that almost would be how it would be when you have a problem like that is you're watching yourself destroy your life and destroy the lives of everyone around you,
Yeah.
um, and have so little control.
Well,
And we don't know why the dad left, right? I don't remember it explaining.
Mm-mm. Nope, he
So
just left.
it could have been the alcohol that drove him away too. I don't know. I
It
mean,
could have been.
I,
but I
why
I
didn't
think
he take the kids? A whole other story.
I think the other part about it, though, as I was reading it, is obviously there is a villain, but I
Mhm.
also thought about, like, as I was reading, I was like, oh, there's also people that are bound by rules, but the rules are actually stopping them from doing good. I thought about the person,
Mhm.
who is running um the
The-
shelter.
Yeah, the shelter.
Right.
And it's like, well, this is our policy. This is there's even that line about how they had steeled themselves for this. They knew, it didn't matter
Mhm.
what the response was. It didn't matter there was nothing that she could say. And I think about, anytime you're in a position where you're dealing with people, about how sometimes we can't do shades of gray when maybe we should.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that really stuck with me from that story was who is like, and like you said, obviously part of the point is the mother is affecting the life of the child, but part of me was like, somebody should say, what about the kid, right? At some point, why
Mhm.
isn't anybody, not to sound like Maud Flanders from The Simpsons, but won't someone think of the children? Um,
Exactly. Yeah, and the her biggest fear is that she will lose her son. But when you think about it and you think about what she's putting him through, I don't know. That's a lot to say in a story is like
Yeah, it
maybe
is.
he's better off in another situation. Like I don't know. I would not be able to make that judgment. He's with his mom and his mom loves him. You know what I mean?
But
So,
she's incapable of taking care of him.
but she's incapable of taking care of him.
yeah, it's
Exactly.
a very different. It's kind of to go a little bit classical lit. It's the antithesis of Huckleberry Finn and his father, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
where he was abusive, where he was, so the best thing that Huck could do is get away from his abusive father.
Right. Right.
That's not the case here.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to leave it messy, I guess is kind of true. So
Ooze in
Um,
more ways than one.
yes, it's gotta hurt. And the messier it is, the more it hurts. And I don't know why I'm like that. I don't know why I want to damage people with my fiction,
I don't
but
think you're damaging people. I mean, it's it's not like I mean, any story you follow in life, if you follow it long enough, ends in tragedy. All of our lives are
mm,
messy. I mean, all of our things, everything bad is going to happen to you. It doesn't mean that life's
ain't that the fucking truth?
it's true. It doesn't mean that life's
Yeah.
any less beautiful than it ever was, but
Mm,
you're not getting out of this alive.
Well, and
yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about your work as well is that your characters have those dimensions. They have
Mm,
thinking about going back to the Phantom Pain. This idea that if I'm remembering correctly, the student that needs help or that asks for
mm,
help, um, you know, they get the response that they get. Again, kind of the well, this is what we're supposed to say type response.
yeah.
But then ultimately, the protagonist makes a choice to say, well, even though I said that, I'm going to do X. I'm going to, and I think that's really interesting because I think that's a very real response. But
Yeah.
at the same time, a little bit of that psychological damage is already done to the student, right? The student
Right.
went for help and didn't get it initially, and we don't know where that story is going to go per se,
Hmm.
because too much ooze gets in the way, too much challenge, too many things get in the way. But that
There
part
was a
stuck with
story
me.
there though. Yeah, there was
Yeah,
a
Not
story
there's
there.
sorry, not since we did that 4-parter on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Part 2, The Secret of Ooze, have we said the ooze this many times.
but I think that's really I think that makes your stories really real because there are all those things that
Right.
that what to me can be a 2-minute encounter where with a student where and I have experienced this working with students where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, just do this, and then they'll come back later going, hey, that really meant a lot to me. I'm like, I don't remember what I said, and I'm not saying that to be dismissive, and usually I just say, oh, thank you, I'm glad it helped, and then I'll try to remember what I said or what I did, and often I don't. I wish I did, so I could be like, "I need to do that again." That worked. Or they'll come back and be like, "How dare you? I don't know what I did. I don't know."
You don't even remember us having sex for 30 years.
No, I'm pretty sure that didn't happen. Though once again, I am on medication,
I
so there
finally
are
got
side
Ruth,
effects.
Anna. It took about 40 minutes and I had to bring it back the 5th time. But
And no one's blushing.
I am
So
I am on medication that does have
blushing?
side effects, so I could misremember things, I guess, but I don't think that's one of the side effects, Joe.
30 years. All on his terms, Chad. He ain't coming to my house.
Mm.
Booty calling me.
to read Poe.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, to read Poe is a euphemism and it
I can
involves
do
chapstick.
I can do El Dorado by memory. I did it in middle school and it still stuck with me. There you go.
Oh wow.
That's exciting news for you.
Yeah, that's what I got, Joe. I don't bring much else to the table.
Ruth Anna, what struck you to sit around, and I'm assuming you're a very rich person because you teach. What struck you to
No.
sit around? Yeah, no, it was sarcasm. But to sit around and go, you know what I'm going to do? Because we have all this extra money left over after I pay all these bills and raise these 42 kids and send them all to all these private schools. I have all this extra money left over, and I'm going to use it on myself, and I'm going to self-publish because there's money there.
Well, you have to survive somehow.
You do.
So I think that's probably how I approached it at first.
But I'm trying to understand how you tick.
Like I think I look at it as this is what I'm doing that I want to do with my life. And teaching is fulfilling in its own way. But it's not necessarily fulfilling me as a person.
Yeah.
So I feel like writing and publishing and doing art and that sort of thing fulfills me as a person. And you have to invest in that. When you find something like that, not everybody has something like that. Not everybody, discovers a passion. And so I discovered a passion and I'm investing in it. But I spend every book I do, I spend less because I'm learning so much more about how to do it. And I'm making connections. And the things do cost money, but if you have skills, you can trade. Um, so I'm developing skills that I can use to trade with people for things that they do. So like proofreading and that kind of thing, where I used to have to go on Fiverr and find somebody to do the proofreading. Now I can make a cover for someone for a story that they wrote, and they can do proofreading for me and that kind of thing. There's ways for this not to be that expensive. So there are a few hard and fast things that absolutely cost money. So for example, like putting Ooze together, I had to pay for the stories. Like you don't ask people to donate stories unless it's a charity anthology. You have to pay for people's stories. So that was a chunk of money. And I don't know if I'm going to make that back, but I think we have some pre-orders. We do have some pre-orders coming in, and then I made the decision just recently to go ahead and put this on Ingram, which means that it can go to bookstores anywhere. And I've already got a few people interested in putting it in their bookstores. So that's super exciting because this will be the first book that I have ordered from Ingram into actual bookstores, which is big. And I'm really excited about that. But that costs money because you have to get an ISBN. So you do have to spend a little bit of money, but you don't have to spend crazy amounts of money to self-publish.
Well, now the next thing is we've had both, self-publishing people who also have who have a publisher, who have agents. We've had, all over the show. And normally when we even don't have writers, we usually have people behind the scenes in movies. If you've had a chance to look through any of our catalog.
Yeah, I love your show.
Oh, you're just saying that because I'm here, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You do flatter us. You do go on. You go on. Tell us more, right, James?
I'll be honest, Joe. If you could just do that, if you could work on your Benoit Blanc. I'm sorry,
Blanc.
Yeah, Benoit Blanc. If you could just do that a little better.
So, Mr. Thomas, Dr. Thomas. Anyway, back to what I was going to say. What's your least favorite thing about all this bullshit?
Trying to get reviews.
Really? So we have people on here who only do our show, and I think James and Chad will back me up on this, just because their buddies say, "Oh, these three a-holes aren't too bad," who can't stand doing the interviews and all that.
Oh no, not interviews.
I know.
Yeah, no, trying to get reviews is terrible. Interviews, I don't know if I hate them yet or not. So far, this is going pretty well.
This your first one?
I did one other one, but it wasn't like it was a completely different type of podcast. But yeah, this is my first one on my book.
What kind of a completely different type of podcast were you doing? Classic Ford tractors?
Hold on. No,
it wasn't
Joe, it was completely different from ours. It was a good one.
That is what I meant. I didn't want.
I thought she was just talking about the John Deere in the 60 mile.
This is my second podcast ever, and the first one where I had to talk about my current work, and yeah.
Oh, this is the first one you've had to talk about your current work.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Here I am. You've got me.
Consider it popped. All right. So yeah, no, and I was just curious. So going down and chasing down people to review your book is a pain in the ass, because the more good reviews, I'm assuming, the more reviews you have,
yeah,
better off you are, right?
Well, and when you get reviews, it's amazing. So getting reviews is fantastic because you get some kind of feedback, and generally my work is fairly well reviewed, and the ones who have something negative to say about it, I'm not worried about it. That doesn't hurt me in my soul at all. Not everything is for everybody, but the number of reviews really matters on Amazon. And on Goodreads, and racking up those numbers for an indie author is just very difficult. It's got to go viral somewhere. Something has to happen for it to, really get up into those hundreds. And it's just, I don't have the reach, and a lot of indie authors, you see them being pretty successful, but if you look at their number of reviews, it's just not very high. So I would say that's the most difficult.
Hmm.
I was about to say, but your works are really well reviewed. Um,
Thank you.
Again, just looking at everything, um, you know, I'll be honest, it's one of those things that if you want to go pessimistic, when you're looking at reviews, and I know people that do this, they'll scan for that 1-star review just so they can be negative. And just looking at, for instance, Side Effects Include
Hmm.
has no 1-star reviews. And by the way, Stephen King gets 1-star reviews. I mean, so
He absolutely does. Yeah, 1-star reviews happen. It'll get one, I'm sure.
And by the way, if any of our jerk listeners are listening to this and think, "Well, I'll be the one," no, don't stop it. I realized we'll have that one guy be like, "Well, he said no, don't."
What should happen?
One of the few negative reviews we ever had it was an attack on Dr. James Thomas below us. And what,
Aw.
Chad, 3 years later, he still brings it up?
Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite actors was Vincent Price, and I finally convinced them to let us do a Vincent Price episode, and it was the first episode we ever did that started getting thumbs down. And I'm like, evidently the kids today don't care about Vincent Price, which is a tragedy.
Aw, that is tragic.
I
Yes.
actually think that is the only episode we've ever done that got thumbs down.
Thanks, Joe. Keep rubbing that salt in the wound. I think it's pretty salt-filled right now.
It is, Chad. Is that the only one?
Yes, Joe.
Pretty
it is.
sure.
It is. Thank you, Joe.
Hold on, we're going to pause the interview right
Hold
now.
on.
Check just to make sure that James's passion project was the only thing to ever
Thanks.
get
Yeah,
negative reviews.
no, I can't wait till I don't know. I've got nothing. But no, so you talk about the number of reviews, which I know really does matter because it affects the algorithm that evidently,
Exactly.
much like medications, algorithms control. If it's not medications, it's algorithms that are telling us what we're going to do, I guess. But it's so those reviews really do matter, and I know I've heard that for Amazon. I've heard it for Goodreads, so, but when people do discover your work, they really genuinely like it. I mean, all the works you have out there are well reviewed. So, listeners, if you are looking for something to read, once again, Ruth Anna Evans, go on the Amazon, pick up a book.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start talking about that. Where can they find everything that you've done? I want you to go through it.
So everything I've done is on Amazon, except I have a really dark story called Hungry that I didn't feel like I could probably publish on Amazon because it has a lot of animal suffering in it, and that is on godless.com. I'm sure you guys have heard of Godless. Yeah, godless.com, and it's called Hungry, and it is about an animal shelter that runs out of food in the middle of like a near future food shortage. So everybody's out of food. All the animal food has been eaten up. People are buying it to feed their kids, and there's nothing to feed the animals. And a local person has been raising dogs for meat. And so the animal shelter owner is not very happy about that, and things happen. So that's on Godless, and I would love for more people to discover not only that site but that story, and everything else is on Amazon. So I've got No One Can Help You on there, and I've got What Did Not Die, the ghost story on there, and then several novelettes as well. Trigger Warning is on there, and we haven't talked about Trigger Warning, I don't think, but it's called Trigger Warning for a reason. It's about a school shooting at a preschool, the aftermath of a school shooting at a preschool, and the kids come back and want revenge. So that is available on Amazon, and all of the proceeds from the sale of that go to Everytown for gun safety. So
That's a tough subject to tackle as a parent.
Yeah.
Or as a human being. Why did
As an American, for sure.
Why did you decide to ascend that hill?
Because I think I've been through so many situations where it's like there's been a threat, and it's time to search. We have to search the students, and we're doing a drill today, and barricade your door, and here's another one on the news, and my daughter asking me questions, and I mean, it happens and happens and happens and happens and happens, and I want revenge. Um, and so I wanted to write a story with some revenge in it, but it's more complicated than that because you can't really, I mean, who are you going to kill? And I would like that story to be read because I can't say the ending without ruining it.
No, I
But
understand. I wanted to hear about the emotion of it.
But
yeah,
I,
it's
all
a
of it.
hard story because it is like this country is riddled with gun violence,
Mhm.
and I had to write it.
but I think, and once again though, you're dealing with the topic of literally or literarily, not literally,
Mhm.
literarily in the story. Obviously, children lose their lives, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I think there's a parallel to, and I have children of my own. You know, they had yesterday. My children spent 2 hours in a football field, not luckily because of a gun, but somebody brought pepper spray in, sprayed it, caused
Mhm.
the child to have an asthma attack. They had to prove it was only pepper spray. They had to evacuate the school. They had, and yada
Yeah.
yada yada.
Yeah.
And I think about. Well, I was joking with my wife. I said, we had the Russian, right? I had to know I had to
Right.
get under my desk if the nuke went off, which that would have done a lot of good. Luckily, I was in a school that was lined with asbestos and lead paint, so I probably would have been okay. Um, Nothing but the finest 1930s construction. But I I literally do think about that we have stolen away their youth in a
Mhm.
different way.
Yeah.
There's no I had to worry about people that literally were across an ocean, and quite frankly, I only vaguely understood that, right? And my father didn't sugarcoat things, and he goes, "Son, you can get under your desk. It's not going to matter." So in some ways, there wasn't that dread, right? If it did happen, we were all gone.
Yeah.
It'd be terrible, but it'd be over quick. Whereas I think, like you were saying, the amount of drills that they have, the amount of just everything constantly,
Yeah.
everything is well, what happened, what's this, what is that, and then we're bombarded with it on the news, and to
Mhm.
the point that my children know my response is, your job, if anything happens, is to come home, whatever that takes, come home.
Yeah.
And that's a different conversation than my parents ever had to have with me.
And it's such a real conversation because it happens. Like it could happen. And
Mhm.
I teach in a public school where, I mean, not to get like I'm not going to tell you the name of the school or
Right.
anything, but right up the road from me, there was a boy who came to school with a very large gun, and he was waiting for everybody, and instead of killing all the students, he ended up shooting himself. And when the buses rolled up, he was laying there on the pavement in front of the school. Like, how can I not write horror? I guess that's the question for myself, is how can I not write horror when the world is so full of horror that I don't know any other way to cope.
Right.
So it's it's not that funny, but that's how I get through, really. It's just so dark out there.
I think you have to. I'm not saying we're laughing at that, but I mean, so what are you going to do other than laugh?
Exactly. Yeah.
What are
So
you
you
going
have
to do?
to
You're going to leave.
you have
You're going to shut your
Ruth Ann
drawers.
Evans has these two sides. There's the side where um everything is horrible the entire story and it ends in sadness. And then there's the side where everything is horrible to the end of the story, and then somebody gets eaten. So
And not in a good way. Sorry. But yeah, no.
so
What are you going to do?
you absolutely, there's definitely that you have to laugh because what else are you gonna do?
I'm with you. You're that whole thing about you have a child, your heart lives outside your body. That's all accurate.
Mm,
But at the same time, the child has to be acclimated to the world because your
yep.
job as a parent is to make sure the child survives without you,
Mhm.
right?
What
Yep. I think
Hey,
mine's feeding herself right now, so that's good.
Oh my goodness, that must be magical.
but you have another story which is available on Amazon. Everything You Love Is Gone,
Yep.
and it's obviously
That's
not
the Joe Lewis story.
a school. I'm right here,
Isn't
Joe. Anyway,
everything you love is gone.
but it's kind of the same thing, except this time it's a force of nature, right?
Mhm.
It's a hurricane,
It's a disaster horror. Yep.
and so this idea that, as Joe was alluding to, we can't protect them
Yeah.
all the time, and even when we try. And I think one of the things that I find really compelling growing up the way that I did is there's also this undercurrent of there's not enough money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It is perhaps easier to protect your child if you have,
Isn't that the truth?
and when you don't have that, what do you sacrifice? So what becomes the parallel? And so I wanted to bring up
The
everything you
choices.
love is
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to bring up Everything You Love Is Gone because I think that's the other side of it, right? And as Joe alluded
Mhm.
to earlier, eventually something gets us all, be it
Mhm.
weird genetic coding, be it, but it's really one of those things that when we think about it, and by reading stories like that, if we've never thought about it, we will, but also it gives us that ability to kind of cope to say, well, what would I do? And what can I
Mhm.
do now to where if I'm ever there, maybe I can be a little better prepared.
Yeah. Exactly. I completely agree with everything that you just said. I feel like that's kind of why I write it because a hurricane you watch on the news a hurricane came and it took everything away, and then you put yourself in the situation, and then what if you're pregnant? What if you do have a small child? What if you have a older, an elder parent on oxygen? Like, all of these things are true and can happen. um you have to be ready for that, not only physically and have the batteries and all of these things that we all kind of stockpiled a little bit during the pandemic. But you have to be emotionally, like,
Mhm.
you have to survive that. So if you can survive the book, maybe you can be a little bit closer to being able to survive something like that. I'm not sure.
The other thing that, and maybe I'm overreading into this, but I think one of the things that also struck me with your work is that, for instance, with and I we've been talking about it, my mind just went blank. Sorry. Um, oh, No One Can Help You, and
Oh yeah.
children being, kind of the tales of lost children being the subtitle.
Hmm.
One thing that struck me, and again, maybe I'm reading into this, but with the example that we've already talked about, Nicholas, he's always there, but the mother still feels very isolated.
Mm.
And that's really struck me because I thought about that. How often are we with our children so we're not alone, but we're also still
Mm.
very isolated? Like I can't, or at least I try not to, burden my children with, let me tell you about Daddy's Day. Uh,
Yeah.
and
But yeah.
and so that was one of the things I was wondering, is that something that was intentional, or am I overly reading into it?
No, I don't think so. I think isolation is a huge theme in almost all of my work. Um, the novella that right now it's with a publisher being read, but if it doesn't get published, I'll be self-publishing it later this year. It's about a podcaster who has bipolar, and
And he had a
um,
relationship with one of the other podcasters for 30 years that he won't acknowledge.
Let it go, Joe. Let it go. The war is over.
sex. They had sex. Just say
That's
it.
all I wanted from him.
But her only relationships are online. She nowhere in the story does she talk to anyone except one neighbor, and he tells her to go away. So all of her relationships are online, and so, like, that theme of isolation is not only something that's in my stories, but it's something that's becoming more and more and more in my stories. Um, and I think that really might go back to the fact that, I did move 20 times before I turned 20. So you know, and I had 5 sisters. But I know it was a lot of sisters. But at the same time, when you have that many people in a family, you do feel isolated as well. So isolation is a theme in my literature, I would say. And it was a theme in a lot of the literature that I loved growing up. I mean, Jane Eyre and Crime and Punishment and all of those things that had was a lot of isolation in it.
All right, we've kept her for over an hour.
Yeah.
Really?
Last thing I wanted to do, I did want to talk a little bit about ooze. So when does ooze?
It's like we don't suck at this.
When does ooze come out? When can people buy ooze?
March 1st. So it's
March-
pre-order is available now. On Amazon, you can just search Ooze Ruth Anna Evans. It's on there. It's only $3.99 to pre-order, and then it'll drop March 1st, paperback and ebook, and then sometime thereafter, it will be available in bookstores.
And you mentioned earlier that Brandon Applegate has a story in this.
Yes.
Are there any other authors that you want people to know that, hey, if you're looking for their next story, it's going to be in ooze?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My 2 featured authors are Judith Sonnet and Roland Bursey Jr. So both of them have some really, really gross stories
So you're
in
telling me
this
it's
book.
gross.
Gross. Like I read it and then I read it again and then I edited it. And I don't think I'm going to go back and read either of them again. Because I love them and I'm proud, so proud to be publishing them, but ew. So if you want that, absolutely pick up Ooze. And then I've got some really some, because I did have that extreme in there, I got to go soft too. So I've got some really beautiful, beautiful soft horror by Emma E. Murray and a couple of other people. Let me see. I have a note. I'm not good at.
That's okay.
Oh, Monica Luzon has a beautiful story about. I don't even want to tell you what that one's about, but it's painful. I've got painful stories in here. I've got soft, emotional stories in here. I've got stories about death and stories about. There's one called Bitch Witch, which is my favorite title ever. About a frat boy who gets what's coming to him. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this book. It's a super short book. It's only 30,000 words. It's going to be teeny tiny, but 21 stories, body horror, super fun.
Amazon, $3.99.
Yeah.
Also, find all of your work on Amazon, correct?
Yeah.
With
And
the
then check out
exception
Hungry
of,
and Godless. Yeah.
Yep.
Check out
Godless.com.
Hungry and Godless. Yep.
Yeah, we got to get Jeff Bezos another yacht.
Well, I agree, but Amazon has done a lot
It
for
really
indie
is.
horror
Yeah.
authors.
In terms for indie authors, Amazon is phenomenal. I am joking. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I it's a deal with the devil. It's a deal with the devil that I will make, and he can have my soul because I want people to read my work.
Yeah, and,
Well, but
and
I
by
think
the way,
also,
I highly recommend reading Side Effects Include.
Phenomenal,
phenomenal short story.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think the other thing about Amazon that I do give credit for is actually helped me discover other authors, though, because once you're in the algorithm, once you buy Ooze, good news, kids, it's going to connect you to other people who write similar type things. And sometimes you have to sort through the algorithm a little bit, but I've discovered a lot of authors because I'll find something I like, I buy it, and then it's, oh, if you like that, please give us more money by buying this. But I usually do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. And it's an honor to be included with some of the authors that Amazon pops me up there with. So yeah, it's just it's a fun community to be part of. That's something that I hadn't really talked about. And I do want to give a shout out to the horror community on Facebook and on Twitter. They have just grown me up as an author in the past year and a half. I couldn't have done it without all of the people on there who have cheered me on. So thank you very much to the horror community.
Oh, Ruth Ann, I forgot to where can they find you on Twitter? I don't think we asked, did we?
No.
Twitter and
It's
your social
just
medias. Put those out there.
yeah, at Ruth Anna Evans on Twitter at Ruth Anna Evans. And I'm Ruth Anna Evans on Facebook as well.
Mhm.
And those are my two main ones. I'm on Instagram as well, but I'll just post what I post on Twitter there. So I think it's author Ruth Anna Evans. I'm not sure. But Ruth Anna Evans, everywhere you look, there I am.
All right. So check out Ooze. Is there anything you'd like to talk about before we go?
I really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.
No,
Oh,
we
thanks for
appreciate
joining
your
us.
time. Thank you so much. We love meeting authors. James, you got anything before we roll out? Yeah.
No, I was going to say, check out, as Chad's already done the recommendation, but yes, read these works that we've talked about, discover them, share them with others, because it really, there's stuff that struck me and keeps striking me when I try to close my eyes. So,
And all I got to say is the ending of Side Effects Include will happen in real life if I catch James rubbing up on Joe again.
Do it.
I mean,
And
I
that's a good way
don't know. I don't know how well your digestion system works, Chad, but we'll see what happens.
And that's a good way to end Bonehead Weekly. Thank you so much, Ruth Ann Evans.